Okay. Hi, Bradley. How are you?
Doug, great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm doing great.
Thank you for coming on this show. It's a pleasure to have you on. And looking at your bio right away, thank you very much for your service to our country. We appreciate that. And it
You bet.
looks it looks like you're a musician. You play guitars.
I don't know if I call it playing. I noodle around a bit. I'm still learning. I had some goals in life, and one of them was to write a book. So I can cross that off the list. And the other one was to learn how to play an instrument. So I noodle around and take lessons on YouTube and stuff like that. So I don't know if I call it playing, but it's hopefully getting there someday.
All right, but you're enjoying yourself doing it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, your bio is very interesting, and I'm going to kind of jump around here a little bit. But basically, you started in the military, you enlisted in the Army in 1984, and you served for 4 years. And then somehow you got back to the Army, right? And made a career of it.
Yep.
Okay, why don't you tell that story a little bit?
Well, I originally had joined for the college money, and what had happened was my best friend had already joined right after we graduated. He enlisted, and one day we were hanging out at during the summer of 1984, and he said, "Hey, I need to stop by the recruiting office," and so I just happened to be with him at the time, and of course, recruiters being recruiters, they saw me and said, "Hey, what have you thought about what you want to do with your life, that kind of thing?" And so they said, "Well, why don't you just take a practice ASVAB test and see how you score?" And I scored really well on it. And so they said, "There's really no jobs that aren't available to you." And so I ended up sitting down with them and looking through jobs, and I remembered as a young person, as a kid, that my parents liked to take us to the airport to watch the planes land in Portland, where I grew up, and so I told them that, and they said, "Oh, you want to be a pilot?" And I said, "No, I'm not interested in being a pilot. I already had like a really scary incident in an aircraft, and wasn't interested in that." But they brought up radar repairman, and I basically said, "You get me that job, and I'll join." And so I joined, and there was some veterans education assistance program that I was part of that I was able to save some money for college. And so I really only planned to serve, those 4 years and then get out and further my education. And obviously, with the military, it gives you the practical background. So I did that, and I was out for 4 years. And the thing is just the military never left my system. It just, I thought about it, and I realized the impact that it had on my life and the person that I was becoming. And so, yes, I found my way back into the military.
Okay, what was it about the military that brought you back? Was it the camaraderie? Was it the discipline, the environment? What was it? All of the above?
Well, I trained as a radar repairman, and I was in school for a year, and then I got sent to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, and after studying for a year to work on radars, and I found out I was going to do a different job, and I ended up in the research and development arm of the military under Test and Evaluations Command, and they sent me to the electronic proving ground in Fort Huachuca, Arizona. So I was on we were testing the forefront of systems that had yet to be fielded. When I got there, we were testing UAVs were being tested, unmanned aerial vehicles, night vision goggles were being tested, and then the system that I ended up working um, for the rest of my enlistment was the system that was the genesis to GPS. And so I got to see like kind of a vision of down the road of what was going to transpire and how these new systems were going to revolutionize the battlefield in our favor. And so once I got out, it just seemed like it constantly called to me, and I started to realize the impact that early leaders had on me, and so I came to Utah and was in college and looked at joining the National Guard here in Utah and found out they had an aviation unit. And as a radar repairman, I was already part of aviation branch. And so I joined that unit just as a regular Guard member because it offered me some tuition assistance, federal and state tuition assistance for college. And then drill once a week meant more money in my pocket. And then 2 weeks in the summer was a good paycheck because I was already a sergeant by then. And so I went back in just as a regular Guard member, which most initial entry Guard members are college students. And so the financial assistance is a tremendous help. And so I was in the unit a couple, probably a year and a half, 2 years, and they offered me a full-time position as a wage grade technician. So I became a federal employee at that point. So my federal service continued on, and so I got to work on Apaches as a technician. So I basically left college and went to work full time and loved it. Absolutely loved working on the Apache. Amazing platform. And so I did that. And once I did that, it just, my career just kind of seemed to take off. We were deployed over in Kuwait during when September 11th happened. And so that just changed the landscape in the military tremendously. And that was about the point that I was stepping up into leadership roles. And so, like I said, it was just something that never left my system. And once I, made a decision to go back in the Guard and stuff, it just kind of, like, my path just kind of opened up to me. And I always count myself as being very blessed and very grateful to have had a tremendously good experience in the military.
Let me ask you something about September 11. You said you were in Kuwait on that day, yeah? What was it like
Yeah.
seeing it from that perspective? Because I was here, I was in Boston, and we saw it on TV, like most people who weren't right there on ground zero. But what was the reaction over there?
We were on the flight line. It was late afternoon. We were working on an Apache, and we looked around and we saw the security on the base were racing around in their Humvees, and then they got up into the Guard towers and with their weapons drawn. And we kind of looked at each other and thought it must be an exercise. And so I told my guys, you keep working on the bird, and I'm going to go into one of the contracting offices there on the airfield and find out what's going on. Because usually that's something that we would hear, that would be briefed to us. Hey, they're going to be doing an exercise. And so I went into the contracting office, the Raytheon office, and there were probably 5 or 6 contractors sitting in there at their desks with just the 1,000-yard stare with the TV on. And the second plane had just hit the other tower. And, we knew instantly that the game had changed. And from one moment to the next, your life is never the same. And so I went and got my guys. They finished working on the helicopter, and then we went to the chow hall. And the chow hall is a big gathering place, and so there's always this level of noise in the chow hall and talking and stuff. And we walked in there, and it was dead silent. And I remember walking around, getting our food and stuff, and I looked several soldiers in the eyes. Soldiers I didn't know. There were probably hundreds of soldiers in the chow hall at the time. And I looked them in the eye, and I remember distinctly just seeing a look of resolve on everyone's face. And it was just, the message to me was, game on. This is real, and we're going to be involved. And I'll never forget that look of resolve. It's always stuck with me.
So at that point, everybody was pretty much convinced that we were going to go to war. But
oh yeah, absolutely.
The problem was, who were we going to go to war with?
True. I mean, we didn't know. I mean, our task force commander brought all of our task force into the hangar shortly thereafter and said, look, we're one of the most forward deployed combat units in the military, so we need to be ready for anything. And so, there was a period there where we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if we were going to just pack up and jump to another spot somewhere in the world. We ended up, staying in Kuwait and providing security and watching as units arrived, geared up, and then took off from there. And obviously, Afghanistan was not far away from where we were at. And Kuwait became a jump off point for many units. And we basically, watched these units arrive, get their gear, and then take off from there. So it was a front row seat to the whole thing. It really was.
Did you end up going to Afghanistan or to Iraq during that time?
I didn't go then. I went later on in 2012. We did a deployment into Afghanistan. My unit actually did two deployments. The first one was in 2004, 2005, and that was to Afghanistan. And that was, I talk about in the book where my first wife passed away suddenly right before that the unit got activated. And so they told me at that point that, you're not going, because I had, three young children at home and my wife had passed away and stuff. So I watched that my people, my unit, and my soldiers gear up and go to Afghanistan for a year. And they came back, of course, and then I ended up going with the unit finally in 2012 for a combat deployment.
We've got just a minute and a half left, and I want to mention your book. It's called Treading the Deep. Is this your first book that you've written, or have you written other books?
Nope, this is my very first book.
Okay.
And go ahead.
I was just going to ask, what is the takeaway? What do you want people to get out of this book? I assume the book is kind of what we've just been talking about, your life story and your journey through this life. What is the takeaway, though?
Well, the takeaway is it's a tribute to the soldiers that I served with, but a tribute to all service members and first responders. So I wrote it as a way to bridge the gap with young soldiers. When I made Command Sergeant Major, I met with young soldiers regularly, and I would get questions like, did you ever imagine that when you were in our shoes, that you'd ever become a Command Sergeant Major? And so I was asked questions like that. So it was a way to bridge the gap to show them, hey, we all start from somewhere. And I told them when I met with them, and also in the book, that I wasn't the smartest soldier, I wasn't the strongest soldier, but I did certain things. I stayed in shape. I asked to go to schools, and I did those things, and it just, my career opened up to me. And so it was a way to show them what I was like when I was a young soldier. There's some embarrassing stories in the book that are hilarious now, but not they were not hilarious at the time. But as a way to show them, hey, I started out somewhere. I made some mistakes along the way, but I kept pushing forward. And so, the one great thing about the military is that soldiers that, and service members that join the military, may only serve for 4 years and they may get out. But I can promise you one thing: they are going to go on. The majority are going to go on in society, and they're going to make a difference. They're going to be the ones that go the extra mile for whoever they, whatever career they choose in life. And so I think the benefits that former service members provide to our country in whatever their chosen field is are incalculable at this point. And so, who hasn't heard that, this first responder, he had prior military service, and we hear it all the time. And so, it was a tribute to those people that are out there, first responders especially, that are on the front lines in our country and helping out, as well as those who are still serving in uniform. So, a tribute to their service.
Bradley, we do have to wind this down. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thanks so much for coming on this show. Last question, do you have a website that you want to give out?
Absolutely. I'm on Instagram, author Bradley Jones. I'm on Twitter, author BP Jones. I'm on Facebook at bradley.jones.3914. If they want to look up treadingthedeep.com, that'll take them to the webpage that's about my book. So it's available on Amazon. Kindle version. The audiobook is out, and I narrated it, as well as the paperback book, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. So they can go to those places and download the book if they want to, or actually buy a copy. So
Okay.
thanks for having me on the show, Dad.
Great. Well, it's my pleasure. Again, thank you for your service, and best of luck with the book. I hope it does well.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on the show, Doug. It's been a pleasure.